The rain drummed steadily against the tall arched windows of the small suburban library on the outskirts of Boston. It was the kind of rain that made the world outside seem distant, softened by the misty haze of water streaming down the glass. Inside, the air was warm and filled with a quiet rustling of pages turning, the occasional click of a keyboard, and the muffled whispers of patrons lost in their own literary worlds. Emily Carter, the library's dedicated librarian, moved with practiced ease among the shelves, her fingertips brushing against the spines of well-loved books as she carefully reshelved the returns. She loved this place, the scent of old paper, the worn wooden desks that had held generations of readers, and the way time seemed to slow down within these walls. It was more than just a building filled with books. It was a sanctuary for those who sought comfort in stories. As she moved toward the children's section, a quiet presence caught her attention. Near the farthest bookshelf, just beyond the reading nook with its plush chairs and colorful bean bags, sat a boy in a wheelchair. His back was straight, his hands resting lightly on the arms of his chair, but his eyes, deep brown and filled with longing, were fixed on the towering shelves before him. He wasn't reaching for a book, wasn't even moving, just sitting there watching. Emily paused, observing him for a moment. He was young, perhaps 8 or 9, with neatly combed dark hair and delicate features. His expression held a mixture of curiosity and hesitancy, as if he wanted to step forward but was afraid to disturb the quiet balance of the library. His gaze flickered from one book to another, lingering on the colorful covers, yet he made no effort to retrieve one. Something about his quiet yearning stirred something deep within her. She knew that look, the look of someone who wanted to belong, to reach out but didn't quite know how. Taking a slow breath, she approached him with a gentle smile, crouching down to his eye level. "Hi there," she said softly, careful not to startle him. "Are you looking for something special?" The boy hesitated, glancing at her before quickly looking back at the books. He didn't speak, but the way his fingers curled slightly over the armrests of his chair told her he had something to say, if only he had the words. Emily knelt beside the boy, her voice gentle yet inviting. "Would you like some help picking a book?" she asked, tilting her head slightly to meet his uncertain gaze. The boy hesitated, his fingers gripping the fabric of his pants as if weighing his options. He didn't answer right away, but Emily could see the quiet hunger in his eyes, the longing for something just out of reach. Slowly, he nodded. Encouraged, she turned to the nearby shelf, scanning the rows of books. "Let's see. Do you like adventure stories? Or maybe something about animals?" she offered, pulling out a few options. The boy's gaze flickered to a book with a bright blue cover, one adorned with a soaring dragon and a young knight. "This one?" she asked, holding it up for him to see. Again he nodded, more firmly this time. Emily smiled, settling onto the carpeted floor beside him. She opened the book, smoothing her hand over the pages before beginning to read. Her voice was warm and animated, carrying the words off the page and into the air, painting vivid images of castles, enchanted forests, and fire-breathing dragons. The boy's posture shifted as he listened. At first he remained still, but as the story unfolded, his expression changed, his lips parted slightly, his fingers twitching with excitement. When the young knight in the story bravely confronted the dragon, the boy's eyes widened, and for the first time since Emily had noticed him, a small breathy chuckle escaped his lips. Unbeknownst to Emily, someone was watching. Across the library, seated in a quiet corner near the expansive windows, Ethan Blackwell observed the scene with an unreadable expression. He was a man who commanded power in every room he entered, yet here he remained unnoticed. His sharp gaze, usually reserved for boardrooms and business negotiations, was fixed on the woman reading to his son. It was an unfamiliar sight, Noah, engaged, reacting, connecting. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had spent fortunes on the best tutors, therapists, and specialists, yet here was a simple librarian, drawing his son into a world he had struggled to reach. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin, watching as the librarian unknowingly unraveled something within his son, something even he, with all his wealth and influence, had never been able to touch. The next morning, as Emily unlocked the library's front doors and prepared for another routine day, a neatly dressed man in a tailored suit approached her. His posture was straight, his expression impassive, but his presence exuded an air of quiet authority. "Miss Carter?" he inquired smoothly, holding out a crisp envelope. Emily hesitated before accepting it. The thick paper felt expensive beneath her fingertips, embossed with gold lettering that bore an unfamiliar crest. She glanced up at the man, her brow furrowing. "Who is this from?" "I work for Mr. Ethan Blackwell," the man stated. "He requests your presence this afternoon. A driver will be waiting outside the library at 3. Emily's fingers tightened around the envelope. Ethan Blackwell. She had noticed him in the library yesterday, the man in the crisp, dark suit who had watched her read to the boy in the wheelchair. What did he want from her? The rest of the day passed in a blur, her thoughts circling the unexpected invitation. She had heard of Ethan Blackwell before. Who hadn't? A billionaire investor, a man of power and wealth, someone whose name was spoken in financial circles with both admiration and wariness. What business could he possibly have with her, a humble librarian? At precisely 3 o'clock, a sleek black car idled at the curb outside the library. Emily hesitated before sliding into the back seat, where the scent of fine leather and polished wood surrounded her. The drive was short, delivering her to an upscale cafe nestled in the heart of the city. Inside, beneath the glow of chandeliers, Ethan Blackwell sat waiting. He was an imposing figure even in repose, his sharp gaze assessing as she approached. He gestured toward the seat opposite him, and Emily lowered herself onto the cushioned chair, feeling suddenly out of place among the elegantly dressed patrons. "Miss Carter," Ethan began, his voice smooth yet firm. "Thank you for coming." Emily clasped her hands together, resisting the urge to fidget. "I wasn't sure I had a choice," she admitted. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. "I like efficiency." Then, without preamble, he leaned forward. "The boy you read to yesterday, his name is Noah. He's my son." Emily's breath hitched slightly. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a ripple of surprise through her. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "And I have a proposition for you." Emily sat rigid in her chair, her fingers curled around the delicate porcelain cup of coffee she had barely touched. Across from her, Ethan Blackwell observed her reaction with the same calculating intensity she imagined he used in business meetings. His presence was commanding, his posture relaxed yet entirely in control. "I want to hire you," he stated simply. Emily blinked. "Excuse me." "To read to my son," he continued, as if it were the most natural request in the world. "Yesterday, I watched you with him. You engaged Noah in a way I've never seen before. I've spent years trying to find the right people to connect with him, to help him engage with the world. Therapists, tutors, specialists, all of them highly qualified, yet none of them managed what you did in a single afternoon." Emily's throat went dry. She had worked with children for years, seen firsthand the power of storytelling to bring comfort, joy, and even healing. But the idea that a man like Ethan Blackwell would personally seek her out for such a role was beyond anything she had imagined. I'm just a librarian," she stammered. "I don't have any formal training in special education or therapy." Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "I'm not looking for a specialist. I'm looking for someone who can reach my son, someone he actually responds to. And he responded to you." Emily exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Blackwell, but I don't think I'm the person you're looking for. Noah deserves someone with real expertise." Ethan's expression remained unreadable. "What Noah deserves is someone who makes him feel seen. You did that." He took a sip of his coffee, then leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I'm offering a generous salary. Flexible hours. You'll have access to anything you need, resources, books, training if that's what concerns you." The offer was undeniably tempting, more than anything she had ever been presented with. A salary that would probably triple what she made at the library. The chance to make a real difference in a child's life. And yet, Emily glanced around the cafe. The crisp white tablecloths, the gleaming silverware, the soft murmur of conversations spoken in hushed, polished tones. Everything about this world, the world of wealth and privilege, felt foreign to her. She had spent her life surrounded by books, by ordinary people who found escape in the stories she helped them discover. The idea of stepping into the life of a billionaire, of working within the walls of his undoubtedly extravagant home, left her feeling like an imposter. She met Ethan's gaze again, searching for some hint of warmth behind his cool, unwavering demeanor. "I don't know if I belong in your world," she admitted. For a moment, Ethan was silent. Then, in a voice softer than before, he said, "It's not about my world, Miss Carter. It's about Noah's." The words settled heavily between them. Emily swallowed, torn between logic and instinct, practicality and possibility. And for the first time, she considered saying yes. Emily stepped out of the sleek black car, her breath catching slightly as she took in the grand estate before her. The Blackwell mansion was even more opulent than she had imagined, an architectural marvel of pristine white stone, towering columns, and sprawling gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly in either direction. It was the kind of place that belonged in magazines, the kind of world she had only read about in books. As she ascended the marble steps, the massive double doors opened before she could even lift a hand to knock. A sharply dressed butler, his expression neutral but his eyes quietly assessing, stepped aside to let her in. The inside of the mansion was just as breathtaking. The ceiling soared impossibly high, adorned with intricate chandeliers that bathed everything in a golden glow. Expensive art lined the walls, the floors gleamed beneath her feet, and the scent of fresh flowers lingered in the air. Yet, despite the grandeur, Emily couldn't shake the sense that she didn't belong. She walked cautiously through the hallway, following the butler's silent lead. As they passed through a vast sitting room, she caught whispers from the far end of the corridor. "She's the new tutor?" a voice murmured, just low enough to suggest secrecy but loud enough to be heard. "A librarian, I heard," another replied, the tone tinged with skepticism. "Not exactly the type of person you'd expect here." Emily's grip tightened around the strap of her bag, her pulse quickening. She had expected some resistance. This was, after all, the home of one of the wealthiest men in the country. But the murmured judgments stung nonetheless. She glanced at the staff members as they passed, a housekeeper polishing an already gleaming vase, a maid adjusting the placement of a velvet cushion, a man in a pressed suit carrying a silver tray. Each of them stole brief glances at her, their expressions carefully blank but their curiosity evident. Emily squared her shoulders, forcing herself to keep her head high. She wasn't here to impress them. She was here for Noah. And no amount of whispered doubts would change that. The first few days at the Blackwell estate were quiet, almost too quiet. Noah remained reserved, his interactions with Emily limited to nods and small gestures. He would listen as she read to him, his dark eyes watching her carefully, but he never spoke. He was guarded, hesitant, as though unsure whether she would truly stay. Emily understood. Trust wasn't something that could be forced, it had to be earned. So she gave him space, keeping their reading sessions light and engaging, letting him set the pace. Instead of expecting him to respond right away, she filled the silences with warmth and patience, offering stories that spoke to bravery and adventure, to knights who found their voices and unlikely heroes who changed their own destinies. Slowly, something shifted. One afternoon, as Emily flipped a page, she heard a quiet chuckle. It was barely there, just a breath of amusement, but when she looked up, Noah was smiling, small, hesitant but real. Encouraged, she pushed forward. "You know," she mused, tapping her finger against the book's cover, "I think this knight reminds me of you." Noah's eyes flickered with curiosity, his fingers tracing the hem of his sweater. "Why?" he asked softly. Emily smiled. It was the first word he had spoken to her. "Because he's strong," she said simply. "Even when he doesn't think he is." From that moment, Their sessions felt different. Noah no longer just listened. He began to engage, asking quiet questions about the characters, pointing to illustrations, even sharing a rare laugh when Emily made a dramatic reading voice. Bit by bit, he unfolded, revealing layers of curiosity and intelligence that had been hidden beneath his silence. But not everyone was convinced. Ethan Blackwell watched their interactions with cool detachment, his skepticism never far from the surface. He was a man who trusted actions, not intentions, and to him, nothing in life came without motive. One evening, as Emily packed up her things, Ethan finally voiced his doubts. "You're getting along well with him," he remarked, his tone unreadable. Emily turned, meeting his gaze. "I'd like to think so." Ethan studied her for a moment, then leaned back against his desk, arms crossed. "Noah doesn't open up easily. He's been disappointed before." The implication was clear. Emily held her ground. "I'm not here to disappoint him." Ethan's expression remained impassive. "People always say that. Then they leave." Something about his words struck a deeper chord. This wasn't just about Noah. Emily saw it then, a glimpse of something unspoken behind Ethan's carefully controlled exterior. She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere," she said simply. Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a beat too long, searching for cracks in her conviction. But he found none. The accusation came like a storm, swift and unforgiving. Emily had just arrived at the Blackwell estate when she sensed that something was wrong. The usual quiet hum of the household was replaced by a tense, suffocating silence. The staff barely met her eyes as she walked through the marble-floored hallway. Their murmurs hushed the moment she passed. She found Ethan in his study, standing rigidly behind his massive mahogany desk. His expression was unreadable, but the sharpness in his gaze sent a chill down her spine. Beside him, a uniformed security officer held a clipboard, his stance professional but firm. Ethan didn't waste time on pleasantries. "A rare manuscript has gone missing from my personal collection," he said, his voice measured but laced with restrained anger. "The last recorded access to it was 2 days ago. And the only person unaccounted for in the library at that time was you." Emily's breath caught. "What?" "The manuscript is worth over $250,000, Ethan continued, his jaw tight. "And now it's gone." The weight of his words pressed heavily on her chest. "You think I took it?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead he studied her, his piercing gaze searching for something: guilt, hesitation, a flicker of deception. But Emily had nothing to give him except shock and disbelief. "I don't steal," she said, her voice stronger this time. Ethan exhaled sharply, his frustration evident. "Noah trusts you," he said, quieter now, but no less intense. "And I trusted you enough to let you into his life. If I find out I was wrong—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the warning was clear. Emily's stomach twisted. She had worked so hard to earn Noah's trust, to prove to Ethan that she belonged in his son's world. And now, with nothing but a missing book and circumstantial timing, all of that was unraveling before her eyes. She straightened her shoulders. "Then let me help find out who really took it," she said, her voice unwavering. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. For the first time since she had met him, Emily saw something flicker in his gaze, not anger but hesitation. The damage had been done. The question now was whether it could be undone. Emily felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. The accusation had come swiftly, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "I saw her," the housekeeper said, her voice edged with certainty. "Late at night, near the library. She was in there alone." The words echoed in the cavernous study, bouncing off the walls like an unforgiving verdict. Ethan Blackwell stood motionless behind his desk, his expression unreadable, but his silence was damning enough. Emily turned to the woman who had spoken. "That's not true," she said firmly. "I haven't stepped foot in that room after hours." The housekeeper folded her arms, shaking her head. Then why were you near the hall? Emily's mind raced. She had been in the mansion that evening, but only briefly. She had stayed late with Noah, reading to him until he grew sleepy, then quietly left his room. Had she passed the hallway leading to the library? Maybe. But she had never entered. Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze locked onto her like a hawk studying its prey. Emily, he said, his voice measured, I want to believe you. But my patience for deception is thin. The words stung more than she expected. You think I did this? She asked, hurt lacing her tone. I think, Ethan said carefully, that you need to understand how this looks. He tapped a file on his desk, containing security reports and statements from his staff. A priceless manuscript disappears. You're one of the few people who has access. A witness claims they saw you in the area. Emily swallowed hard. That's not proof. Ethan didn't flinch. Then give me a better explanation. She clenched her fists, her mind a storm of frustration and disbelief. She had spent weeks building trust with Noah, with Ethan. Now, in a matter of moments, it was all crumbling. A deep breath steadied her resolve. She could walk away, leave the mansion and never look back. But that would mean letting them believe she was guilty. And that, more than anything, was unacceptable. I'm not leaving until I find out who really took it, Emily declared, her voice steady. Ethan raised a brow. You're that confident? Emily met his gaze head-on. I am. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Fine, he said finally. Prove it. Emily knew she had little time. If she wanted to clear her name, she had to act fast. She spent hours combing through the details, retracing every moment leading up to the disappearance of the manuscript. Something didn't add up. If the thief had truly been an outsider, there would have been signs, forced entry, security alerts, missing surveillance footage. But there were none. Which meant the culprit had to be someone from within the estate. That realization sent a chill down her spine. She paid closer attention to the household staff, to the way they whispered when they thought she wasn't looking. She listened, observed, pieced together fragments of conversations that had seemed insignificant before. And then, finally, she caught a break. A slip of a name. Jonathan Reeves. Ethan's longtime personal assistant. A man trusted with the billionaire's most valuable assets, a figure who had been with the Blackwell family for years. He was meticulous, professional, and seemingly loyal. But Emily had seen it before. Loyalty could be an illusion. Digging deeper, she discovered whispers of an underground market dealing in rare manuscripts and first-edition books. Transactions that left little trace, deals made in secrecy. And Jonathan? His name had surfaced more than once in connection to such dealings. The missing manuscript wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. A piece of literary history that would fetch millions on the black market. And Jonathan had been the one to oversee the library's collection. He had the access, the knowledge, the opportunity. It all made sense. Heart-pounding, Emily gathered every shred of evidence she could. Copies of records, timestamps of when Jonathan had been alone in the library, inconsistencies in his statements to Ethan. She knew confronting him outright would be dangerous. Jonathan was too smart to slip up easily. Instead, she turned to the only person who could do something about it. Ethan Blackwell. She found him in his office, tense and unreadable as always. But when she laid out her findings, cold, undeniable proof, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. Then anger. Emily stepped back as Ethan exhaled sharply, his jaw clenched. The realization hit him hard. Someone he had trusted for years had betrayed him. And Emily had just exposed it. Emily stood in Ethan Blackwell's office, her hands gripping the folder of evidence as if it were a lifeline. Across from her, Ethan sat behind his massive desk, his expression unreadable, his piercing gaze locked onto her. The weight of the moment pressed heavily in the air between them. She took a steady breath and placed the folder in front of him. "I told you I wasn't lying," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "And here's the proof." Ethan's jaw tightened as he reached for the file. His movements were slow, calculated, but his fingers clenched slightly as he flipped through the pages. Emily had compiled everything: security logs, financial transactions, and most importantly, Jonathan Reeves' connection to the illegal book trade. It was all there, laid out in black and white. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. His eyes scanned each piece of evidence with the precision of a man used to reading contracts worth billions. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, edged with something Emily couldn't quite place. "You're sure about this?" Emily crossed her arms. "I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't." Ethan exhaled sharply and leaned back in his chair. He looked almost tired, as if the weight of betrayal had just settled onto his shoulders. "Jonathan has been with me for years," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I trusted him." Emily softened, but only slightly. "That's what makes people like him dangerous. They rely on that trust." Ethan's gaze flicked back up to hers. For the first time since she had met him, something in his expression shifted. Not skepticism, not cold judgment, but something closer to reluctant respect. "I misjudged you," he admitted. Emily raised an eyebrow. "You think?" The corners of his mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly, but he shook his head. "This doesn't change the fact that you were accused," he said. "People will talk." Emily shrugged. "Let them. The truth is what matters." Ethan studied her for a moment longer, then reached for his phone. His voice was clipped, decisive. "Get Jonathan Reeves in my office. Now." Emily didn't move. She had done what she came to do. The rest was up to Ethan. And from the look in his eyes, justice was coming. The tension in Ethan Blackwell's office had dissipated, replaced by a heavy silence. The confrontation was over. Jonathan Reeves had been exposed, escorted out of the mansion in disgrace, and the missing manuscript was already on its way back to its rightful place. Justice had been served. But the damage had already been done. Ethan stood near the window, his back to Emily, hands in his pockets. He had been silent for a long time, staring out at the sprawling gardens below, lost in thought. Emily, standing near the door, waited. She had no intention of making it easy for him. Finally he turned, his expression unreadable as always, but there was something different in his eyes. Less steel, more weight. "I was wrong about you," he said at last. Emily crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "Yes, you were." A ghost of a smirk flickered across his lips at her bluntness, but it vanished just as quickly. He exhaled, as if trying to let go of something heavier than just pride. "I don't trust easily," he admitted. "And when trust is broken, I act. Swiftly. Sometimes, too swiftly." His jaw tightened. "I should have given you the benefit of the doubt." Emily let his words settle, measuring them. "Noah believed in me," she finally said. "He never doubted me for a second." Ethan flinched, just slightly, but enough for her to notice. "That's the thing about kids," she continued. "They see the truth before adults do." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, looking, for the first time since she had met him, genuinely tired. "You could have walked away," he said. "Most people would have." "I thought about it," Emily admitted. "But then I realized something." He lifted a brow, waiting. "Noah," she said simply. "I wasn't just proving my innocence to you. I was proving to him that people don't just disappear when things get hard." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, something softer. He nodded, as if absorbing her words. Then, with a slow breath, he looked her in the eyes. "I owe you an apology." Emily tilted her head. "You do." Ethan huffed a quiet laugh, self-deprecating, almost. "I'll do better." Emily studied him for a moment, then nodded. For Noah's sake, I hope you do." Without another word, she turned and walked out, leaving Ethan standing there, alone with his thoughts and his regrets. A week had passed since the truth had come to light. The stolen manuscript was back in Ethan Blackwell's collection. The staff at the estate no longer whispered when Emily walked by, and Jonathan Reeves was gone, his betrayal now nothing more than a stain on the Blackwell legacy. But for Emily, the real victory wasn't in clearing her name. It was in Noah. The boy had changed. He was still quiet, still cautious, but there was a new light in his eyes when she arrived. He no longer hesitated before picking a book. He no longer needed coaxing to ask questions. The walls he had once hidden behind were slowly coming down, piece by piece, and Emily knew she had been a part of that. And now, Ethan wanted her to stay. He had asked her that morning, in his usual direct, no-nonsense way. "I want you to work with Noah permanently, as his educational advisor." The offer had stunned her. It wasn't just a tutoring position, it was a commitment. A place in Noah's life, in the Blackwell household. A role that meant more than just reading books, it meant shaping the way he saw the world. Emily had told him she needed time to think. And so that afternoon, she found herself in the library with Noah once again, the warm glow of the sun filtering through the tall windows. He sat curled up in his wheelchair beside her, a well-loved book resting on his lap. Today's story was a classic, a tale of a young prince who had lost his way but found his strength through friendship and perseverance. Emily turned the pages slowly, letting Noah take in the words at his own pace. Occasionally, he would glance up at her, as if to make sure she was still there, as if afraid that, like so many before her, she might suddenly disappear. She wouldn't. She had made him a promise, and she intended to keep it. Across the room, near the doorway, Ethan stood watching. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just observed. His usual guarded expression was softer now, his eyes distant, contemplative. Emily wondered what he saw when he looked at them. Did he see what she saw? That Noah was changing, growing, finding confidence in a world that had once felt too big for him? Did he realize that despite his wealth and power, this quiet moment, was something money could never buy? When she finally closed the book, Noah exhaled, satisfied. He looked up at her, his small hands resting on the pages. "Will you read to me again tomorrow?" he asked. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. The answer had been there all along. She smiled, brushing a hand gently over the book's worn cover. "Of course," she said. "Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a simple story, a patient voice, a promise kept, could change not just one life but many." Life often teaches us that wealth and power cannot buy the most precious things: trust, connection, and the ability to truly change a life. In this story, Emily, a humble librarian, does not possess riches or influence, yet she gives Noah something invaluable, the gift of being seen and understood. Her kindness, patience, and willingness to stand by him transform not just the boy, but even his powerful father, Ethan Blackwell. For those of us who have lived through decades of change, we know that it is not the grand gestures that shape a life, but the small moments: reading a book to a child, offering a listening ear, choosing to believe in someone when the world turns against them. No matter our age, we all have the power to make a difference in someone's life. A kind word, a shared story, a hand reaching out in support, these are the things that truly last. As we grow older, it is these connections, these acts of kindness, that define the legacy we leave behind. Because in the end, it is love and compassion, not wealth, that make a life truly rich.